I will now have the pleasure to shift our focus slightly as I try not to stand in the way, and the pleasure to introduce onto stage two speakers that we have already been told are here today. One is Marek Magryś, who is the acting director of the Academic Computer Center Cyfronet at AGH Kraków. He's also the head of the National Center of Computing Competence with EuroHPC and an expert for the European Commission thereof. And he is also the chief architect of some of the fastest Polish supercomputers lately, such as Helios, Athena, Prometheus. Marek Magryś. And my second speaker is our other Swiss guest, Professor Thomas Schultes, who is the director of the Swiss National Supercomputing Center, CSCS, in Lugano, as well as a professor of computational physics at ETH. Thomas Schultes. Now I see I have two mics. Should I switch them? I will ask this very openly. No one's shaking their head, so I will just keep mine. Thank you. So, first of all, thank you for joining us today, especially, well, both of you have traveled, so this is amazing to have you here. And I believe, actually, before I start asking my questions, congratulations are in order. Both of your institutes had great news last week. So, on one hand, we have Kraków, that will now be home to the Gaia AI Factory, part of the European initiative, the EU initiative, but also the CSCS, that is now an AI antenna, one of only 13 in Europe, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So also part of a great European initiative all over. Congratulations. Thank you. So up until now, we have heard a lot about international cooperation. We have also heard something about geopolitics, and we will now take the switch towards research. So I would like to say, first of all, both of you are clearly at the state of the art of what is happening today. And I believe a lot of us are hearing a lot about state-of-the-art research and especially supercomputing, US, China as two global players. Now, my question to you would be, how do either of you, both of you, assess the global situation? And also, where do you see Europe's place in this competition? Do you see us as a great global player? Where's our place? What can we do? Maybe I will start with Mark, because he's looking at me so nicely.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and take part into this discussion and start from this very easy question, right, about geopolitics and European place in the race. So it's being foreseen as a technology race, and we need to define what is the metric which we use to actually judge where Europe is at the race, right? And I see that there is this high drive into defining the metric as the amount of GPUs available at a certain region. And I don't think it's the right metric. I'm not saying that this is not an important factor we should take into consideration, but I don't think this is a goal of itself. The goal should be the level of innovation. The goal should be what is the clever thing we can do with the GPUs we have available, and to make sure that we are actually making a good investment when we actually think about procuring them. And supercomputing centers as CSCS, as Cyfronet, we've been dealing with high-performance computing for decades now, right? So we've seen different technologies come and go. We definitely didn't anticipate, I didn't anticipate what would happen with AI development and what size of data centers we would see in the other parts of the world. And it is a bit shame that in Europe we are not able to build something which would be comparable to what we see in the US or in China, as you mentioned before, in terms of the data center size for research. The LLM boom, which has happened over the last several years, definitely has changed the way we think about the development of supercomputing resources and data centers. I think that Europe has extremely high potential on the science and the research field. We have extremely clever people. We need to make sure that we can make them work together, that we can collaborate. And I think that this is the still unused potential of Europe, which we can use to get advantage into this race into who will be the leading AI development force in the future. We cannot do it without resources, to be clear, but resources are just part of the equation. They are not the final solution for the success here.
And perhaps also our people, our researchers are part of the resources that we can use as well.
Sure, of course, yeah.
Thomas, please.
Yeah, that's a bit, surprising question. It's a good question of the time. I wish we would be more focused on values and goals and less about us versus them. So I have two passports, a Swiss and an American passport. I spent the last, 3 decades collaborating, working in the US, collaborating, and those collaborations haven't stopped. My friends, they all still exist. We work very well together, and we advance together. And also, much of our success at CSES is much due to the collaboration with companies like Cray, that has been acquired by HPE and NVIDIA. So we had wonderful work with NVIDIA the last 15 years. And I completely do not understand why we should view this differently now or in the future. And I don't think NVIDIA would like to see this differently, or HPE. But we had political pressure also in Europe to change sides. And I think this is fundamentally the wrong ansatz. We have, since the 17th century, it started in Europe with modern science. We have, we are separating science and our understanding of technology and objective reality from religious beliefs, which are valid but personal, and we have something about objective reality. And this is what the discussion and the collaboration should be about. I admit and I agree that now we have some craziness going on with some of the big tech companies. And NVIDIA, interestingly, is not really among them because it serves them all and it serves the rest of the world. And again, I speak from personal experiences here. So somehow I think we should, it's more about the open society which exists in Europe. Maybe not everywhere in Europe, but in most places. It also exists in Switzerland. And it exists in places like Singapore, Korea, South Korea, I mean, and also Japan, so East Asia. And it still exists also in the US. So I think it's more about something around big tech in the US and some things in China that become less known to us, but not because of a mistake by the Chinese people. It's the governments don't work well together, and that makes things obscure. But I had the privilege to talk to some of my Chinese colleagues earlier this summer, and I realized it's still the same people with the same beliefs, the same also joys and passions and so on. And somehow I wish we don't talk us versus them, but we talk about how we get humans to talk together, work together.
So would you say that maybe from your perspective as also a researcher, this division between US, China, and then maybe Europe's place is not necessarily true or is somewhat artificial?
It is made, look, we talk about policy, and of course policy is important also for science. But in the end, it's what we, the people in countries who elect politicians, end up thinking that we should do or not do. And I don't see the confrontation between the people. It's more a confrontation at the moment between some of the leaders who have somehow lost their compass. And and we just need to make sure, also as scientists and engineers, that we focus on our values, we understand our values, and we stick with those.
So I will actually take this as an optimistic note that there is a place for us and there is potential for us. And I have the impression both of you have kind of already alluded to this. There is this one phrase that we hear a lot, the European values or the European way of doing. And I did actually, before this panel, check what the official definition of that is, because I was wondering whether there is one. I'm sure all of you have heard this phrase before. And the EU's AI Continent Action Plan, defines it as the European approach to artificial intelligence centers on excellence and trust, aiming to boost research and industrial capacity while ensuring safety and fundamental rights. So I was thinking maybe we could make this somewhat more concrete, and I would like to ask both of you, firstly, do you see this European way, the European values? I think yes, since both of you have alluded to it. And in your research, maybe particularly in the models that we have already mentioned, the Apertos, that was already mentioned by the ambassador earlier, but maybe also the Polish Plum model. Where do you see these values coming in? Do you think they are good examples? And perhaps also at the same time, how does this mean they differ from other models that we know? Things maybe like ChatGPT, which I believe is still the most famous one.
Well, the Apertos is fully open. Fully open means it's open weight, which GPT is not. But Llama or DeepSeek are. It's fully open also in terms of data and fully compliant in terms of data, compliant with our laws and our values. It is the start of a model. We started the initiative 2 years ago, and our goal is to create the competence to train such a model completely from scratch, build the competence, and it takes a lot of people to work together. We have probably around 100 authors of the first paper and about 120, 130 people that were involved in this, technically involved. And now, why are we doing this? The idea behind this is we need for science, and it so happens also for society, to get society and local companies in Switzerland on board. We need a fully attributable model. And this is, by the way, not just Switzerland. We need that elsewhere in Europe and also in Japan and in Singapore. And so that's the goal of Apertus. At the moment, it's the first release. The first release is never, is where you learn. It's being reviewed now by the community and so on. And the purpose of this is, one is fully attributable, so you understand if something doesn't work. Everybody can look at it and figure out what doesn't work. Everybody can look at it and create ideas on how to improve. And most importantly, we, and I mean now and hope the community, not just ETH and EPFL and CSES, but can now take this, understand it, and explain it. And we need to explain it to teachers, to people who are interested. And when we explain and understand it, then AI is no longer mystical, but it becomes a tool that we control. It's not something that belongs to some companies that control us. And I think this is the strategy where I'm convinced it will win. We have many examples in history where that's how things ended up being. And we shouldn't be so intimidated by what's going on at the moment.
So I think what's very interesting with the Apertus project is the model itself, of course, but the data set, right? The data set, the fact that it's open, the fact that we know what data was used to actually construct a model. And in theory, we could start over with a different subset of the data set if for whatever reason we need to do that. That's something which we don't get from the other public open models, right? We don't get the data set. And it's well known that the large techs didn't really care about any legal aspects of the data used for training of their large models. we do care about that. Especially, I think that this is part of the European values, and the AI Act and the regulations which we have in Europe are often being seen as limiting. And of course, from the technical side, they are limiting, right? But on the other hand, they are meant to preserve our values, and we need to take that into respect. We can discuss, okay, how far should we go? What should be the approach for the future? Maybe we need some modifications also on the other aspects of data governance, but this discussion needs to happen in respect of the European values. And I think that such initiatives as Apertus, such initiatives as the ones we have in Poland, so Plum and Bielik, the two large language models developed by Polish teams, by the way, also with our supercomputers, have huge potential of making a change even now, right? So small models, but because still we are not, we don't have enough potential in Europe for now to build a 1T open model. We don't have enough data. We don't have enough compute power. That's something which we have discussed yesterday with Thomas, right? Maybe we should take this approach together jointly as Europeans to make sure that this is something which we can secure for the future. But what's important is that for every nation, we take the sovereignty aspect into consideration, and we build models which reflect the local language, reflect the local culture, reflect the local values, and many of those are shared among Europe, right? We have different languages, different language groups, of course, but the values are basically the same as Thomas mentioned before. But we need to have those solutions so they can be implemented everywhere where we cannot really send data over to the cloud. So we need to remember that everything you currently do with the leadership, the leading AI models, you are basically sending your data over to someone else. And again, coming back to what I said before, it's probably going to be used to teach the next generations of models, right? And maybe that's not something which you want to do with your data. And the only solution here is to have something which you can launch in your own infrastructure, which you control, which you understand how it was made, and what it will mean to your business. That's why Bielik, that's why Plum, that's why Apertus. These are very important initiatives. We need to make sure that they work together, that they exchange experience. That's another portion of the big tech work, right? They don't really share that much about what they do. They do publish some research. They don't publish everything, of course. So we need to make sure that within the community which is doing this development, we do collaborate with each other, and we're not doing redundant work. So there is little reason to build like 10 European foundational models with the same size. They will probably be more or less the same in the end, but it's not really an efficient use of resources.
Maybe if I can just immediately jump onto that, because both of you have alluded to, let's say, the resources that we have now, also different language groups, different data, but what definitely comes through here is the need for European cooperation, right? Across the field, across research groups, and probably also beyond, with the inclusion of business and just other fields as well. So my question, maybe the next one to both of you, would be, where do you see potential or the current state of European cooperation, and also perhaps specifically, since we are here today, what are the roles that you see for both of your institutes or for Switzerland and Poland within this European framework of cooperation, let's say more broadly? We have also heard the MOU, so we hope that this has given some framework, but what is your opinion or your perspective from where you stand?
So maybe just to introduce all of you to the initiative we've been collaborating in for some time now. That's the LUMI system. LUMI is one of Europe's most powerful supercomputers. Actually, it's behind the Swiss now. So yeah, but it used to be number 3 in the world when it debuted on the top 500 list. And let's not discuss what the list means, but anyway, it's a big system, right? But what's more important is that it's a big collaboration of several countries who decided to join the forces together, who decided to pool their funds to build one big system in a place where it makes sense from the data center perspective, right? So LUMI is a system which is co-owned by the European Commission, by EuroHPCJU, but also Switzerland, also Poland, Czech Republic, several Scandinavian states. And it's put in the northern part of Finland, where you have a very good quality of electrical power, where the energy is sustainable, where you have things to do with the heat, which is being produced while the system is running, which means that we can operate the system at a much lower cost than, say, in Italy, right, or Spain. Also in Poland, whether we like it or not, but the geography is something which we can use to our benefit and which we can use to make our investment a better investment, basically. And that's a very nice collaboration which has started and which will be developed in the future. And I think it's a good case to show that we already do collaborate on that, and it is possible. It requires a lot of will. It requires a lot of long-term thinking, but it is possible.
Maybe if I could slightly adapt my question for you, Thomas, because yesterday the both of you mentioned something to me that I found extremely interesting, namely how Apertus can be, like you mentioned earlier, it is now the first version, let's say, how this can serve as a type of foundation as well for this type of cooperation that you have now mentioned. Maybe you could expand on that within the European context.
I think the natural way to proceed is to see Apertus the base model. So in training of foundational models, you have a so-called pre-training phase, which takes about 90 or 99% of the resources. And then you have the post-training where you do the alignment, or you can also call the indoctrination of the model. And seriously, we are all indoctrinated. We all learn the culture and respect.
We're all neural networks.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's very natural that the pre-training part of Apertus or some improved architecture is done jointly in a multinational context. So I hope to see several countries working together, and I really strongly push to make this beyond Europe. It has to be, we have other countries that have the same innovation power. For example, you talk about Switzerland leading. I don't know what that exactly means, but we know Singapore is also very strong. We also know Israel is very strong. Unfortunately, they are tied in a very difficult situation now. But Japan, so we should also look outside of Europe and find countries that have similar innovation culture, join together and invest in an infrastructure that, like Marek said, is deployed in an area where you have environmentally friendly electrical power. You need a lot of GPUs, and they need hundreds of megawatts of power. And we cannot build that in Switzerland now. And so you put that somewhere together. I also would like to see more collaborations with private investors. And then you focus the public part on the foundation, the pre-training. Then the national parts in the different countries, like Marek Center, like CSES, do the local post-training to adapt the foundation to the local cultures, the local economic settings. And of course, the same can then be done by companies who use it to develop their products.
So essentially, we'd have one large, let's say, basis that takes, like you said, a lot of power to train, and then the localization would be also feasible with smaller centers, let's say, that don't need this type of, let's say, global player level power.
Yeah, so on the European level, that's on the AI continent plan, that maps into the gigafactory and AI factory concept. Now, I don't want to get into details of that because we might get into the wrong path of the discussion about the efficiency and whether this is the best way. It's a way, and there's no path which like we can just follow, right? So we will probably make some mistakes and to hopefully learn from the mistakes, right? But we should definitely think about strategic approach to collaboration on that field. In that field, that's the only way we can be relevant in the race we have started discussion from, however you define the race, right?
So you made a very important point. We will probably make some mistakes. Yes, whenever you do something new, you will fail. And it's important with the agile approach is to fail, understand the failure quickly, and then improve on that. And this was exactly what we did with Apertus when I had to stop at some point the pre-training, end of July, and then we had to go in the post-training. It was way crazy short, 4 weeks for the post-training until the first release. Of course, it would have been better to do another 3 months, but it's more important, it's out there for criticism. We learn from it, and we can already prepare the next release that's improved. So what we need to learn, and this is now really a plea that I have to Europe and the European Commission, we have to learn to fail and recover from failure. We cannot have this culture of innovation where every project, every high-risk project, high-risk, high payoff, is a success. It just doesn't work like that in technology. But I think that's really where I hope we change. And then if we change that, there is enough innovation power throughout Europe and in other countries, like countries in the world, to carry this.
And I would add one more thing. We need to remember when discussing about the development of supercomputing resources for the purpose of AI development, not to orphan the HPC community, the scientific computations community, right? I see that this is somehow happening. No one discusses traditional supercomputing now. Everyone talks about AI. Everyone wants to invest into AI. But we still get extremely high value science from the traditional supercomputing systems. And we need to make sure that we do have investment capacity for that, but we also have the technological plan for that, because HPC is getting more and more challenging because of the GPU vendors are focusing on where the money is, and the money is at AI, right? So this is also a big challenge for centers like ours to make sure that we have a sustainable path for the future, and we know what to tell our users to expect from the future technologies and how to adapt their code. This is often an activity which takes years, right? I remember when you first started doing GPUs in CSCS in 2010, I think, right? With the XK6 system, there was a plan for GPU porting years before that, right? So we also need to be sure that this portion of the community is not being orphaned or overthrown by the AI community. AI is important. It's great for innovation. It's great for industrial applications, but it's not all of scientific computing, right?
So maybe since we today have primarily an audience of different business leaders and stakeholders in the world of business as well, my, let's say, last question, because I see we are slowly coming to the end, to both of you would be, the fact that you have earlier also mentioned the need for cooperation beyond just the field of, let's say, research, whether that be a diplomacy like we heard earlier, but then also business. So what would be, let's say, your, not so much a pitch, I'm not trying to make you sell yourselves to these people, but what would be your message, or where do you see a cooperation and the value of whether that be traditional or, let's say, more AI-focused supercomputing today? How would, in your mind, an ideal cooperation with the world of business look?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have a lot of ideas, and we have to get to know each other. And it turns out, particularly in Switzerland, this is very important. I think the reaction of some of our businesses, I have to say it now openly, is a bit underwhelming on this whole Apertus story. The reaction of foreign businesses is actually stronger. And I think there are two levels. We do need to find ways how public and private work together in public-private partnerships. This is another point where I think Switzerland can learn a lot, maybe from Poland, from other European countries. At the level of the high-end infrastructures, there we need the cooperation. because you cannot spend that kind of taxpayer money, to develop these infrastructures. So we need at the highest level a cooperation to create a sustainable business model for these open models. And many people are skeptic about that, but I can say we've had that movie go. I'm old enough to remember the development from Unix to Linux, and now nobody remembers that there were non-open versions of Linux that this started from. So at that level, and then I think also what is very, very important and is being neglected at the moment is that we need to reach the small, medium enterprises not just around the centers like Zurich, where ETH is a startup factory, very successful. All the big tech companies have their European headquarters, or many of them have them in Zurich, and they buy all the startups. Okay, so it's kind of a different form of colonialism happening where we are like targeted now, we need to invest in the cantons in collaborations with startup, maybe startups, but also SMEs that are. We are going to try this in Lugano. I hope to work with some other partners in Switzerland, also in the central Switzerland, and so to try to bring AI into the local businesses. Mm-hmm. Not that they start using ChatGPT, but that they start developing their own technology based on AI. And given that we have the know-how at the universities of applied sciences and at the two federal institutes of technology, it should be possible to pull this off. And that's how you get the buy-in and how society can absorb AI, okay?
And understand it as well.
Understand it, yes.
And on the other hand, we need the industrial use cases, right? We feed on needs which we can address with the innovation. So we need to have this discussion going, and it's a very different discussion with the large industry, which typically knows what they need. They typically have already some capacity, and I think it's easier to collaborate on the technical level with them. It's a bit harder on the legal level, right? Because large corporations, universities, typically it's not an easy discussion about the documents, risks, and so on. But we do that. And an example of such collaboration would be CipherNet and ABB, to stay in the Swiss context, right? ABB has a big R&D center in Krakow, and we do some collaboration, which is going very well. But with the SMEs and startups, it's a bit of a different story. They come and go. They are very human resource hungry in terms of the amount of time you need to invest to get the collaboration going, to understand their needs. And also we need to be sure that we're not stepping over any of the public aid regulations which we have both in Europe and in Poland, right? It is challenging from our perspective. I think that there's still work to be done here on the national and European legislation level. This is something which the European Commission is working on now because of the Gigafactory projects and because of, we need to rethink how do we do public or state aid. So there are some challenges, but they can be overcome. And again, especially in the AI community, we already have some collaborations like that. Going back to the LLMs, there's the Bielik model, which is being developed at CipherNet, and there are several startups which do very interesting work on adapting the model into particular fields of industry. There's a great startup doing this for legal texts. And it's really a really great collaboration where we know where to head with the development of the model. They can use the resources to advance and to build the sovereignty on the technological infrastructure. So I think there's a lot of potential in that. Yeah.
I'm afraid I'm actually running out of time, or I have run out of time. So I just have one last question. If you had one or two sentences that you would like, now I'm getting to the pitch, to address to the business people here, let's say, In order to have great cooperation in, will it be research and development or getting problems, what would it be? What would be your hope that you could get from business if you had to summarize it? Maybe that's too difficult.
No, I can. Maybe you will be surprised by the answer now. I was recently at an HPE organized event, and we realized that at the engineering level, the knowledge about AI and modern computing. So this is like Marek said, it's not just AI, it's scientific computing, engineering. The knowledge is actually very well established, surprisingly, even AI. But that's at the engineering level. That's not where the decisions are made. And so we need to, I would like the businesses to look at their boards and their supervisory boards and maybe look at, who is really leading and making the strategic decision, and whether you should put some people there who, or grow people faster, because if the decisions are not done right, then the ship goes in the wrong direction.
I would say the same. So the pitch point would be trust your engineers. They know what they do. Control them, but trust them. And if someone tells you that your company will now, evolve by being fully cloudified, just ask for the numbers and ask for an engineer to look at the numbers. And if you have the right answer, then come to us, discuss, and we can help.
So, ladies and gentlemen, trust your engineers, learn how AI works and supercomputing, I guess. And thank you very much to both of my speakers and to all the great insights that we just had. Thank you.